really get a better understanding of how we can be better as a unit, how I can be better as a quarterback. And, that'll be my focus, tonight and tomorrow and moving forward through the week.
Okay. Welcome into Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd Zolgad, Declan Goff producing.
What are you going to learn from that game?
And I want to start this thing off here with you guys. Okay. We're going to get into Vikings statements, and we'll do this after every Vikings games. Vikings statements, definitive, declarative things that we can say about the Vikings following whatever happens. In this case, another debacle loss. From this point forward, I never want to hear another quarterback say after a disaster performance, we just got to look at the film. I'm not really sure what happened there. Yeah,
do you know what that means?
The house was on fire for 3 hours. I just got to look at the film.
That means you have absolutely no clue as to what just transpired, and so you're just going to say something that really, ultimately, in this case, makes no sense because there's nothing to be learned from that game.
Look at the film.
You suck.
What?
Hey, I suck. I learned something.
But look at the film. I mean, Bill Belichick does that. We just got to look at the film because that's the answer he's given for 20 years. But I don't know. I'm not going to be super nitpicky about, I don't really care what Kirk Cousins says after a game like that. But if you're going to say anything, I'd just say, you know what? I got to be better.
Oh,
just
right.
Just own it.
But that's the first statement, right?
Andrew Luck actually used to be the most annoyingly brilliant. Andrew Luck would because he was the only good player on that Colts team for 3 of his 6 years, where they didn't have an offensive line. They traded for Trent Richards. They traded a first-round pick for a crappy bust running back. And they'd get, the defense would give up 40 points or something, and Andrew Luck would throw for 330 and 4 touchdowns. And after every game, he'd be like, I just got to be better. Yeah, that loss is on me. It's like, Andrew, your team give up 50 points. I got to be better. But that's the type of leadership that I want.
But if you're Kirk Cousins and you are making as much as he is towards the cap, don't you go to the Zoom call, sit down, put on your Kirk Cousins headphones, and say, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start by saying this. I was awful today. Let's just talk about that.
Has he ever said that?
No.
The Packers interception last year.
He's never.
The Bears interception.
I don't ever remember him selling himself out to the point where you say, you know what? That's a leader.
I would have felt great. Remember that speech that Tim Tebow made after the Florida lost 12 years ago? Florida lost a game to Ole Miss or something.
Yeah.
And Tim Tebow read a handwritten letter to the media. I think it was the next day because he had to have time to write the letter. I don't think he wrote it in the postgame locker room. I think it was the next day. And he opens up this crumpled piece of paper and he basically says, I would just like to apologize to our fans, to you guys, the media, to everyone in the locker room. What we did on Saturday was unacceptable. I need Kirk Cousins at this point after an 0-2 start to have a handwritten, crumpled up piece of paper at the Wednesday press conferences and read it to the media over a Zoom call and apologize about 100
a chalkboard
times. Yes.
I will not throw to Thielen every time next game. I'll write that 100 times like a Simpsons.
So let's get into it. Deck, let's fire up some appropriate music here.
Absolutely.
And we're just going to call this Vikings Statements on Purple Daily. And there are a lot of them today. So definitive, declarative things that you would like to say about the Minnesota Vikings, players, the team as a whole, whatever, the broadcast team, literally whatever it is. We'll go around the room. Judd Zolgad, go ahead.
All right. In the vein of beginning to think that it might be a very good idea to tank for Trevor, Danielle Hunter can't save your season. So don't worry about bringing him back. He has a neck injury, and I realize that there's different reports on how serious that is. He for sure is out through the week 3 game against the Titans, but we also don't know. Nobody said he's coming back for sure in week 4.
Yeah, it's just he's on the IR.
Yeah.
We know that it has to be 3 weeks.
And he can come back after 3 weeks, but nobody's confirmed he's going to. And he's done some work on the side, but I don't think. Anyway, Danielle Hunter, my statement is, can't save your season. So don't worry about it.
So what would have to happen for you to feel good about bringing Danielle Hunter back? They'd probably have to roll off a couple wins and get back to 500 or something going into October, right? If they were if they won their next 2 games, which
can I tell you this flat out? There is nothing that can happen after those 2 games that will make me feel good about bringing Hunter back, because there's nothing ultimately constructive that's going to happen in 2020. This team is too flawed. And so best case, and I think we broached this topic on Vent Line that we do on Sunday, best case, they might sneak into the playoffs. Okay, you snuck in. You've done that before. I will answer you this. I will answer your question by saying this. There's nothing that they can do in the next 2 weeks or coming weeks that are going to make me feel good about 2020. That doesn't mean that this roster is destined to be terrible in 21, but I would prefer that you almost put the kibosh on Hunter's season entirely as quickly as possible, because he's going to help you a little. He's not going to save you. So what?
Yeah. All right, Declan, Vikings Day. We'll just keep going. We'll just keep going here.
Well, if you're in a home run, write that down edition, I predicted the Vikings to go 14-2. So naturally, they're going to roll off 14 straight wins here. Right?
You're sitting in a great spot right now.
No, yeah. In all seriousness, I would say I'm really confused on what Gary Kubiak is doing. Like, what are you doing, Gary? Like he goes pass heavy to start, then he flips it and gives the ball to Dalvin a decent amount, but then you can't really run the ball when you're down a whole lot. And Dalvin Cook's not getting involved in the passing game. Like, I still like Gary Kubiak. I'm going to give him plenty more of a leash than just 2 games as the full-time OC. And obviously, he had a big influence on last year's success with Kevin Stefanski. But what are you doing, Gary? I think that would be my first statement.
Yeah, it feels kind of clunky. Like, you guys know me. Of the 3 of us, I'm probably the least likely to rip play calling because there's so many things that go into it.
Yeah,
and it's just hard. Sometimes it's hard to, like, they have gone in with a game plan of some kind and we aren't privy to all that information and we're not sitting here breaking down the film with them. But it has felt very discombobulated and clunky so far. Like, it's fair to say that it doesn't feel smooth. It almost feels and looks like Kirk Cousins has never worked in this system before or something in some ways. Right. Now, some of these guys haven't. I mean, like Drew Samia was making his first real significant appearance of his career yesterday. And that was a total disaster.
The scripted plays so far, and they've scored on their opening drive of the first 2 games. The scripted plays look pretty good, and they've got the bootlegs and rollouts and things that look familiar and work. And then after the script ends, it's sort of like Kirk's like, but I can't improv.
And actually that's a good segue into
I don't do improv.
Kirk Cousins isn't good enough. And I know that a lot of you guys who've been listening to Purple Daily, Apple, Spotify, scorenorth.com, or watching our videos on youtube.com/Purple Daily Podcast get frustrated when we tag team and pile on Kirk Cousins. And we have been probably a lot more hard on Kirk Cousins the last couple of years than other media outlets in town. And yesterday is the reason why. Because he isn't good enough to rise above. He's not good enough in 2 ways. He's not good enough to rise above adverse circumstances when things aren't perfect or near perfect around him. He isn't good enough to rise up, to put a team on his back, to make a play that you wouldn't expect him to make, whether it's with mobility, which he doesn't have any, or just sort of turning the pressure around and making a big swing play. Not that he's never done it in his career. We certainly saw the throw to Thielen in the Saints game in the playoffs, but like when you literally have to rack your, when I say how many times with the world crumbling around him has Kirk Cousins risen up and had a jump on my back moment or drive or half, right? When you have to sit and cherry pick, well, there was that Denver game. Oh, but that throw to Thielen against the Saints, like you literally have to go through his entire career and like, oh, yeah, there's that one time. And then there was that other time over here. And I think he had there was the You Like That game. Like he had the You Like That game when he was in Washington. There's 3. Mm-hmm. 3, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen because he's not good enough to do it. And so that brings me to my second thing that he's not good enough for. He's not good enough to be the 6th highest paid quarterback relative to the salary cap average annual value over the course of the contract. He's not good enough to make that kind of money. And that's the frustration. If Kirk Cousins was Gardner Minshew and he made $600,000, I'd say, oh, that's too bad. Like, ideally, he'd be better, but he was like a 6th round pick and whatever. Like, but when you give him that contract, you're putting a spotlight on him and you're putting attention and pressure on him that is warranted. And so, like, you can sit here and say, well, he's not, like, what do you mean? Like, Russell Wilson, he's not Russell Wilson. He's not Pat Mahomes. So why are you comparing him to those guys? Because he makes ridiculous money and prevents the Vikings from making their roster around him better. So it is so frustrating to watch that yesterday and to be like, well, he's got to go look at the film. And, well, the rest of the team was bad too. Yeah, but it all starts with the most influential, important player on the roster, and that's Kirk Cousins. Like, you can't, I'm sorry, but you can't be 6 of 20 for 70 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 picks. And I don't care if we can sit here and say, well, one of the picks was a Hail Mary. Like, they weren't all his fault. He can't be that bad. Like, you have to find a way to be better in that situation when there's that much of a spotlight on you. And this is just the story of Kirk Cousins. And people in Washington are watching that yesterday, and they're saying, yep, that's why we didn't want him to sign for the big contract too.
Former teammates are saying the exact same thing.
So Kirk Cousins is not good enough. That's my statement.
The run defense, this is frightening. The run defense ultimately in 2020 will be worse than the pass defense for the Vikings. That's my statement, and here's the why. The pass defense is bad because the back end is young. The Vikings didn't sign a veteran corner. They're asking just simply too much of Dantzler when he can play, Gladney, Holton Hill, Mike Hughes. I think those guys probably will start to develop some. Not saying that they're going to be perfect. There's nothing to help the run defense. Michael Pierce is sitting out the entire year. They have a bunch of basically backup type of players trying to stop the run up the middle. Those guys are not going to improve. They are who they are, which is rotational guys who used to come in after Linval Joseph, or they were going to come in after Michael Pierce. You are taking chess pieces that you had a role for and now saying, hey, we need you to play more snaps, we need you to start, and we need you to be good. Yep. They are going to continue to get abused in the run game, and unless they find some type of magic on the waiver wire, it ain't going to stop.
Like the guys they're using, like really along the entire defensive line, I'll put a Denebo in there too. Denebo's like situationally decent in terms of pass rushing, but it's basically Unique Ngakoue and three guys that you would only use to give a breather to the real starter, right? Mm-hmm. Like Linval Joseph's like, oh, hold on a second.
Yeah, give me the oxygen in Philadelphia.
Mask. Yep, or in this case, like if Michael Pierce was playing this year,
yes.
Or man, Danielle Hunter's just been getting after it for 15 straight plays. Like I need a breather for a second. All right, put in some other guy.
Absolutely.
Like some other guy is 3/4 of their defensive line right now. Unfortunately.
And the run is going to continue to gash them.
All right, I will go a little positive here. Shockingly, there's like one positive I can take away from yesterday's game.
Punting?
Trying to think can we try to guess it?
If you want.
The positive
Ngakoue.
Bingo.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Unique Ngakoue.
Statistically, he's pretty
He had a good
good
game yesterday.
Okay.
25 pass rushing snaps yesterday. PFF gave him a 90 grade. He forced a fumble, I believe, or he had a sack. He was all over the quarterback. He did what he was supposed to do and being brought in here. And yes, you still need Danielle Hunter, who literally creates like 6 pressures a game, and the Vikings as a whole aren't doing a good job as a unit getting after the quarterback. We saw it again against Phillip Rivers, even with the Colts having a pretty decent offensive line. But I will say, I feel like if Unique Ngakoue had another bad performance like he did in week 1, I know he's trying to get up to speed, so there's a lot of variables against him. I think there would have been some more headhunters against him. So I think it was important for Unique Ngakoue to at least get after the quarterback and prove that, all right, if Danielle Hunter does come back eventually, you're going to have just 2 monsters on the ends.
The Vikings had 6 hurries yesterday. 6.
Against Father Time.
It's pretty bad. In terms of pressures,
old man quarterback.
They did have 9 total pressures when you account for some of the other like hits and sacks. But
guess what?
I mean, Phillip Rivers is a statue, man. That guy used to be mobile like 20 years ago.
Yeah, he used to be able to move around pretty well.
Yeah, so did I.
He's my guy. My guy, Phillip Rivers.
He's my age.
Viking statements continue here. I think the season's over in terms of like playoffs. I just don't. These first 2 games, like home against the Packers, on the road against Indianapolis, most of us, when picking the schedule, had them starting 2-0.
You should hope it is.
Well, we can get. Yeah, we'll definitely get to that part of it.
Yes,
we'll definitely get to that.
I'm with you on both of those statements.
But somebody had sent me here. Track Phantom sent me this screenshot on Twitter today. He's got the information. The Vikings have started 0-2 12 times in franchise history. I believe that's before this one.
Okay.
10 of the 12 ended up as losing seasons overall. I'll give you the records in a second. And just once did they make the playoffs, and it was a first-round wildcard loss, 2008, when they grinded their way. And then that 2008 season, they catapulted with Brett Favre the next offseason.
Hey, they found a quarterback the next season. Imagine that.
Yep. And so overall, when the Vikings start 0-2, their winning percentage in those years was 37%. 2-11, 7-7, 3-7-3, 7-9, 3-13, 5-11, 6-10, 9-7, 10-6 in playoffs. The most recent ones were 2010. They went 6-10 after starting 0-2. 2011, they went 3-13 after starting 0-2. And 2013, they went 5-10-1 after starting 0-2. And here's the problem. Tennessee's coming to town. That's a punchy in the mouth team. They're 2-0 on the season.
They're going to run. Yeah. Derrick Henry's going to run right over you.
I mean, and Ryan Tannehill's been like mostly really good since he got to Tennessee.
Can you play cornerback?
Then you go on the road. Now, Houston's not a great overall team. So I don't think that's just going to be like an automatic loss. But Deshaun Watson, if you're getting carved by Phillip Rivers to some extent,
yes.
I wouldn't say they got carved by Rivers, but like, what's Deshaun Watson going to do in that game?
Can you
and then
say
at Seattle?
Can you say lose contain? They're going to lose contain on Deshaun Watson.
Like realistically,
and then
the bye week is week 7. Like realistically, these next 4 games, Tennessee, Houston, Seattle, those games on the road, and then home against Atlanta. And Atlanta's kind of broken, but they jumped up to a 20-point lead on Dallas in that game. And I don't know if the Vikings have the 20 points down firepower to come back against Atlanta like Dallas did. I mean, how many games can they win of these next 4? They have to win at least 2 to even like give yourself a prayer.
Go through them again. Tennessee,
Houston, Seattle, Atlanta, and they're already 0-2. Like if they split those games, they're 2-4. And then it's at Green Bay out of the bye. Like, and then you still have Tampa and Brady, and they look great yesterday. You still have Dallas, and then the Chicago's 2-0.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, and Green Bay and Chicago are both 2-0 to start the season. So like it's the blink of an eye, but the season started 8 days ago, and it just feels like it's over already. So
I'd like to offer this definitive, declarative Viking statement as a mea culpa. Josh Klein wasn't as bad as we thought. The Vikings right guard, who was jettisoned, I think mainly for contractual and probably partially play purposes after last season, and replaced at first by Pat Elflein, who was just going to move from left to right guard, because if you're not good at left guard, you must be good at right guard. And then he got hurt in practice last week, and as Dex talked about, Drew Samia started at right guard, and Drew Samia, not surprisingly, was not good because he's new at starting and playing offensive line in the National Football League. Mea culpa, Josh Klein, you weren't as bad as we thought. I don't recall anybody being as poor as the Vikings right guard play has been so far this year with Josh Klein last year. I don't think Josh Klein was great.
No,
he is he's probably below what we would consider to be a league average right guard. But that yesterday was horrific, and really the play at right guard, Packers game and the Colts game, horrific.
Hey, who gave up the initial pressure on that safety? And by the way, that safety, I feel like the offensive line gave Kirk Cousins plenty of time to at least get rid of the ball,
or get out of the end zone.
Yeah,
like you can't decide as the whistle is blowing, oh, I should get out of the end zone now.
Yeah.
I think it came from Samia initially. Because it was DeForest Buckner who got the sack and the safety. But unlike a week ago, the debate here is not long. It's on Kirk Cousins to get out of the end zone or throw the ball away.
Actually, real quick, a sub-declarative statement underneath Judd's statement. The Vikings, I believe I saw this from Courtney Cronin yesterday, are the most prolific regular season safety-taking team in the NFL's history. 3 consecutive regular season games going back to week 17, having taken a safety.
Oh, that's nice.
So got that going.
It's only 2 points, you guys, and possession.
That's great. I like one of our guys on Ventline yesterday. And by the way, cheap plug, Vikings Ventline. We set a new record yesterday for the most number of people watching and listening to Vikings Ventline. Hate that it had to be the way that it was, but thank you guys. You can find Vikings Ventline live after every Vikings game on Score North Twitter and Facebook, and also youtube.com/Purple Daily Podcast. And one of our guys who came in, one of our guests, we bring fans into the video with us. And he said, I can't remember, he made some funny comment about Kirk Cousins and safeties, but go watch the video. Cheap plug. Declan Goff. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to see more of Justin Jefferson. And I don't know if that's necessarily just not on Jefferson not getting open enough, but I want to see this kid more. He was a first-round pick. He's obviously not Laquan Treadwell, right? Like, he's clearly not a bust. I don't think he's a bust. He can run a route. He's smart. He was prolific at LSU. And he did technically lead the team in receiving yesterday with 3 catches for 44 yards.
A lot of garbage time there.
But yeah, a lot of garbage time. I want to see this dude play. And I want to see if he's going to be legit and can be the guy that can eventually replace Stephon Diggs. You can't just solely replace Stephon Diggs. We're seeing that right now in Buffalo. The dude's blowing up. He's exactly what they were looking for. but I want to see more of Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I mean, it is nice to see him getting some run there in the second half because I think everything we've seen of him so far is like it's encouraging. Like he can run routes. He's seems to be fairly reliable in the short number of targets or whatever time that we've seen him to this point. So I don't know. It just kind of feels like the Vikings don't really activate all of their weapons until it's too late. And that's where we go back to play calling. It feels clunky until, we're down by 2 touchdowns now. So, now we'll get Justin Jefferson involved.
Is that because the quarterback's not comfortable trying? I don't understand it.
Right.
Yeah. You're a veteran quarterback.
Yeah. All right. Viking statements continued here. I think it was a mistake to give all 3, the GM, the coach, and the quarterback, multi-year contract extensions. And I get that the Kirk Cousins contract was more to like open up some cap space for the season, but now you're locked into for sure a guaranteed 2021 and $10 million in dead cap space in 2022. So like Kirk Cousins is the gift that keeps giving until 2023 in some form or another financially. And when you look at like, where does Mike Zimmer, where does Rick Spielman, where does Kirk Cousins fall in terms of like their peers and where they would rank? None of them are disasters. Kirk Cousins was a disaster yesterday, but he's still like one of the 15 or 20 best quarterbacks in the world. He's certainly not Sean Mannion bad. Like he's a competent NFL quarterback. All right. Mike Zimmer is a good NFL head coach. He's not Bill Belichick. I don't think he's Kyle Shanahan. I don't think he's certainly like what Pete Carroll has done the last 9 or 10 years in Seattle. He's a good head coach with a good record. And there's other teams that would certainly let their current coach go for what Mike Zimmer has done with the Vikings the last 7 years. Rick Spielman's a good GM, hasn't been able to find a long-term franchise quarterback. But what my point is, you would never look at any of those 3 and say, yep, like you could make a case for that being the best GM, the best coach, the best quarterback. They've locked into comfortable. They've locked into good, not great, in some cases mediocre. They've just sort of said like, we're not a train wreck. Like we're not 3-13. We're not 5-15. We're not the Browns. We're not the Lions. Like 9-7, like 8-8. All right. Once in a while, you pop to, a big time record and go to the NFC Championship game. But I'm just so sick of this franchise being comfortable. I want a Super Bowl in this town. It's been 50 years of comfortable. It's time for a Super Bowl. Mike Zimmer versus the Packers and the Bears since he took office, so to speak, as the Vikings coach in 2014.
Yeah.
Against the Packers and the Bears. He's 11-13-1. All right. That's fine. I mean, and one of those wins was over Brett Hundley, technically. So
right.
So I guess you could say it's more like 10-13-1 and then Brett Hundley over here.
Which certainly is not great.
And so I just think it's fair to say it was a mistake giving all 3 of those guys multi-year contract extensions. You've locked into comfortable.
So my final declarative statement is this. But before, again, the Vikings' 10th and final series on Sunday, when the game was done, right, in which Cousins was 4 of 4 for 52 yards. And I believe the drive ended with a Dalvin Cook touchdown. Kirk Cousins was 7 of 22 for 61 yards. So that's the first 9 series, 7 of 22 for 61 yards.
Dude,
here's my statement. I would have benched Kirk Cousins for Mannion in the second half.
Wow.
And here's why.
Wow.
Benching a quarterback can go one of 2 ways. One is the quarterbacks are close enough where it's going to create controversy the next week. And I'll grant you that's a pain in the ass, okay? But the second one is motivation and doing anything you can to push the buttons of said laid back, to use Phil's word, comfortable. And I will go beyond that and say in life and on the field, entitled, which is Kirk Cousins. He is an entitled quarterback. Benching him for Mannion would have embarrassed him, which is what I'm after here. Because I'm at my wit's end. What's going to get this guy to realize that he's my quarterback and I've got no choices? But maybe I do. I would have benched Kirk Cousins for Mannion in the second half and said, Kirk, you're going to watch the second half because what you're doing now is unacceptable. And you are, in my opinion, the face of this loss.
Wow.
It's pretty hot.
So just to clarify, you're not saying Sean Mannion would have given the Vikings a better chance to
Zero
win.
chance.
You're doing it strictly to say, what are we doing here, buddy?
Yes. And
You're
I'm
a franchise quarterback.
And he is, I am convinced in watching him play and watching his actions, he is an entitled human being who I want to yank the entitlement carpet out from under and wake him up.
There's no, I'm fishing for words like edge, alpha, bleep you. Like there's none of that with him. He showed it once when he did the "you like that" at the general manager of the Washington football team, right? It's like,
he has perked up before.
Right, but where is that
right
on a regular basis?
But you're getting embarrassed.
And clearly like these are all rhetorical questions. Like he doesn't have it in him. That's the reality. I think my question off your statement would be, if you're still defending Kirk Cousins, and if you're still, well, the rest of the team was bad too. Well, what do you mean? The offensive line is garbage. What's he supposed to do? I don't know. I mean, there's been plenty of pocket passer quarterbacks that have had to play behind bad offensive lines, and guess what? They figure it out. So what is the defense at this point? Like the defenses are really, well, the other things around him. Okay, then go get a guy that makes $30 million less.
But what's the second half of Sunday's game about, in your opinion? Because in mine, it's this game is lost. Like we're playing terrible. This game to me becomes a puppet string game of whose strings can I pull. And the one person that I know I can yank his chain really pretty simply is Kirk Cousins, who has proven to me during the first half of that game, he deserves it.
Do you think if you were to have pulled that string, do you think he's the type of guy that would respond positively to that? Not like be happy about it, but would react and play his best football for a stretch?
You know what?
Next week and beyond?
I don't know. I want to find out. Because if he doesn't, if he goes into more of a shell, that tells me a ton. And if I'm the coach, I can't worry about his contract. I can't worry about his feelings, which I think Mike doesn't care about. But that to me was a benchable moment.
Dex, your final declarative statement.
Yeah, I'll say that if they lose embarrassingly again against the Titans, and I know the Titans are good, and you got Texans and the Seahawks coming up, I think hot seat starts to talk if you lose again embarrassingly tomorrow or next Sunday. I think the hot seat starts. Patrick Royce, he's all for it. He's giving me thumbs up here in the background.
That was Royce cackling.
That was a Royce laugh, yeah. I think hot seat starts.
So you're saying Mike Zimmer?
Yes.
Well,
the hot seat starts.
And Judd, you brought this up on Ventline yesterday. It was a question that popped up. When the Vikings fired Brad Childress in 2010, different circumstance. It was more of like they were mad that he cut Randy Moss, right?
Insubordinate.
But it was a guarantee. They had signed into a contract extension before the year, right?
Yeah. No, in 2009. Exactly a year before they fired him, they had signed him to an extension through, I think, 2011.
Okay, so he only really had like a year and a half left. I think Zimmer has, I think it's a 3-year deal, right?
They just signed him to it. No, 4 years. It's this year on the final year, and then 21, 22, 23.
So they'd have to eat. I'm guessing that's a fully guaranteed contract.
They'd have to eat good 3.5 years. Yeah, we could certainly vet this out, but it would be a huge bite of the apple to do that right now, financially.
My God.
Need some scapegoat.
All right. And
I love the statement.
All right.
Made Pat laugh.
I'm going to make this statement. I'm going to sort of hit and run with this statement because we'll eventually do this episode probably this week. But my final statement is, it's time for the Vikings to consider tanking for Trevor. Or
there's an episode right
what's
there.
What's the Justin Fields one?
Like the hashtag?
Yeah, like just lose for Justin.
Sure.
I don't know. We got to come up with some of these.
There's an F that came to mind, but I can't use it.
But I think it's time to start discussing what would be better for the long-term viability of the franchise. Is it just embrace the suck and go 3-13 and draft as high as possible in a great quarterback draft, or keep grinding the season out and keep grinding Kirk Cousins the next 2 or 3 years and see what happens? Like, it is legitimately time to start discussing. All right, what are we doing here? What's happening at quarterback? How do you get your mitts on one of these?
Sounds like an entire
dude quarterbacks
episode of Purple Daily.
I think it might have to be.
You like that? You like that? Hey, you held him to 20 points, man. Yes, you gave us a chance at the end, but I got 3 words for you. You like that?
And then it all went downhill after that. So those are your Viking statements here on Purple Daily, following just an absolute bleep show of a loss to the Indianapolis Colts. Any final thoughts here? Any final statements before? There's a lot more to get to later in the week here on Purple Daily.
Well, we got Zim Job Watch. Mm-hmm. We got Tank for Trevor. I'm excited about the rest of the week.
Man. You know, I sort of sometimes when this happens to Minnesota sports teams, I start to go into like, okay, I start to want like now I'm looking at the long play here.
Yeah.
All right. And so if that means if losing to the Titans and losing to the Texans means like a better young quarterback comes in or a more offensive minded approach in an offensive era of the NFL, like I'm here for it. I'm here for it. So thanks for everyone hanging out with us on Purple Daily today. Apple, Spotify, scorenorth.com. If you give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple, it's very helpful to spread the word about the show. And we'll see you guys tomorrow.